Hey folks, how's it going? Thanks for checking the video out. I want to take a look at a super versatile compressor now. This is the IPA25 from Pulsar Audio. Now this is brand new out at the time of filming, and it's just one of those compressors that you can get a million different sounds out of, and by design. It's not just one that, you know, you can change a few settings and it sounds like this, sounds like that. You can retain all the settings, attack and release, ratio, threshold, and just change some other stuff in there. And the amount of compression kind of stays the same, but the way that you're compressing gets much different. And that may sound a little bit confusing, but let's take a look at exactly what it's doing. Let's just hear a quick before and after first, and just hear the punch, because it's so good. So this is before, and then as I click this power button, it's going to come on. I'm going to go over a load of the controls here and just see just how versatile this thing is. So let's take a listen. There's a few features in here that I find especially useful, and I want to kind of highlight them now because they're settings that you don't necessarily get in every single compressor. And the one that I want to highlight first is probably the most important because it goes a few steps beyond what we're used to kind of seeing. So it's this Sidechain EQ section. Typically you'll get like a sidechain in a compressor, and that's fine, and it just rolls off a little bit of the low end. But we've got some mad curves going on here, and you'll see this kind of stuff in a lot of Pulsar plugins, and it's great. It's really versatile. So the way that we can kind of affect this blue slope for a start is the punch mode. So at the moment we're in loud, and then mid and normal. So normal is like no sidechain EQ basically. Loud is leaning more towards the kind of pink noise way of thinking. So it's taking off some low end and adding some high end. And that means that the compressor is going to be more sensitive to high frequencies and less sensitive to low end. So it's kind of altering that balance and meaning that we get something that ultimately we can make louder. That's why it's called loud. And then mid is kind of halfway between the two. The really important one here is the ability to just shove like some nodes in there and take some frequencies out. Just take a listen before any of the sidechain, and then I'll bring it in and just hear what it's doing, and then we'll kind of discuss it. So everything gets a little bit more present. And what I've got here in the yellow band is this is focused around the snare. So by applying an EQ curve in the sidechain detector circuit around that snare, it means that it's not being as focused on the snare. It means that the snare is essentially coming out of that, and it's not going to be compressing the snare as much. The snare is really punchy in this track, and I wanted to allow it to shine. So by taking essentially the snare kind of out of that detector circuit, I'm allowing the snare to punch through and everything else to kind of get compressed around it. Just take a listen as I take this out. You can hear that snare just fall back a little bit. Or conversely, you can be like the opposite, and if we think this is 180 hertz, if we bring that up now, then we can feed more of the snare into that detector, so it's going to get really compressy around that snare. Just a really versatile way of doing things, and a really versatile way of kind of controlling exactly which instruments you have feeding most into that detector. And it's not like an instrument by instrument basis. Obviously there's more stuff kind of sitting in that 180 hertz area, but it's a great way of just zoning in or indeed zoning out on certain frequency areas. And I find that so useful. The second thing is the different circuits. Now we've got the N diode, which we're on at the moment, which is like a diode clipping, diode bridge kind of thing. VMU, which is more of a tubey way of doing things. And then the IPA25, which is, you know, the VCA, the standard kind of way of doing things. But what we've got here is 3 different ways that gain reduction is applied. It doesn't change the amount of gain reduction necessarily, it just changes the way that it kind of comes down. And the differences really, the biggest differences I find are between this N diode and the VMU. And what you're going to hear is that this N diode is so punchy, unbelievably punchy. And when I go to the VMU, it gets just slightly warmer and everything gets slightly more rounded. So just take a listen between those two. The first one's going to be punchy, and then we're going to get a bit more rounded. Yeah, you know, you especially hear it on that snare drum, and I'm really making a lot of this snare drum with this compressor. I'm really kind of using that as a tool to show the versatility. And I think that's important because a snare can really make or break a mix. I know that's a stupid thing to say, like we haven't got a vocal in here yet, but to me, in this kind of music, the snare is really important. And it can get too squashed if you're compressing the amount that you need to for the rest of the track. So being able to do that is really, really vital. The IPA25, you know, it sounds great as well. It kind of, I guess it kind of sits in the middle. I don't know. Have a listen as I just flick between these 3. Yeah, so to me, N diode is the most punchy. VMU is the most relaxed, maybe, and that's not about the amount of gain reduction that's applying. It's just the actual tone of it. It just sounds a little warmer and gooier. And the IPA25 maybe kind of sits in the middle of those, and it's still got attack, but not as much punch as the N diode, but it's still kind of attacky and cracky. And that's fantastic. Having those 3 different options in there is really, really essential to having a really versatile compressor. Another thing that I want to show you is this clipper and limiter. So essentially what you can do here is, you see, I'm kind of skirting past all the normal controls on a compressor like threshold, ratio, attack, release, because you know those, you know, these are user definable things that we just set those to taste. And really with any compressor, you're going to be using those for the most part. It's about the other stuff. And the clipper and limiter is a really useful feature that you can put at different points in the mix. So in this most basic sense, before the compressor or after the compressor, really. And I'm applying the clipper here. You've also got a limiter, but really what you're doing, if you put it before the compressor, you're clipping off transients. So the compressor has to not work as hard. It doesn't have to kind of chase those transients. I tend to like to put it post-mix because I like to get all the sound of that really punchy N diode compressor and then stick a clipper on afterwards, which just helps to kind of tame those transients. Have a listen before and after, and we'll maybe go a little more extreme on this and kind of hear. Yeah, you see, to me, that clipper, what it's doing is, because I'm taking essentially the snare frequency range out of the detector, I'm kind of not compressing the snare all that much. I'm compressing everything around it. And then that clipper is taking that snare down and it's just chopping down the transients. And I find that to be such a useful feature to have that in there so that you can compress what you want and then clip the rest of the stuff. And the limiter is also useful kind of in a different way. It's a very natural sounding limiter. It doesn't get choky. It doesn't get kind of brick wall-y, slammy. It operates in a kind of a different way. You'll notice on the Pulsar Audio, on their YouTube channel, I did the release content for this. So I kind of got to know this compressor pretty well. And the way that it actually limits is not like a brick wall. It's not your standard kind of limiter. it works on local peaks and valleys. So it's actually analyzing stuff as it's going, and it's kind of listening to kicks and vocals differently, and it's listening to bass instruments and guitar mid-range stuff very differently. So it doesn't get choky, it doesn't get really slammy, it's a bit more natural. So let's bring it in and crank it up a little bit and just see exactly what it's doing. Let's bring it all the way down first, and then bring the limiter in, and then take it off and just hear. So you'll have seen here that it's at most it's bringing off 12 dB of gain reduction. So it's chopping 12 dB off the top. If you go to an L2 and take off 12 dB, my God, that sounds awful. But this sounds great. It sounds really natural, and it just sounds awesome. So different compressor options, gain reduction options, good. Clipper and limiter, good. Sidechain EQ, very, very good. And overall, it's just got a great tone to it. It just sounds really... There's no other word. It just is good. It's a good compressor. This is the only thing that I can really say. It sounds great on buses, and I like using it on a master bus. I think that's really useful. I've not even gone into like all this stuff here. If you want to check that out, go over to the Pulsar channel, because I've done like a really deep dive on that and gone over everything. Some things you might want to look at are the look ahead and look behind, which is kind of useful, and this different sidechain stuff here where you can essentially link functions. But one last thing I do want to take a look at is this feedback and feed forward. So this is a classic thing. The hardware this is emulating, this is a classic thing on there. We have feedback and feed forward, and this is to do with the amount of harmonics that are essentially fed back into the detector. So you're going to hear when I stick it on feedback and then click to feed forward, we get something very, very different. So just another way this is versatile. Just take a listen. So feed forward is so much more aggressive, but you have this mix control, so you can kind of tame that and just bring it back and do something a little bit in parallel. So let's try that in feed forward. It's a great sound, and you're kind of slamming stuff, but you don't really hear that you're slamming stuff. Like if you look at this compression gain reduction and the amount of limiting we're applying here as well, just check out how much gain reduction we're actually applying. So you can see here, like we're getting 8 dB of gain reduction on the compressor, and then almost another 8 on the limiter and clipper as well. And it does not sound like we are. It sounds like it's squashing it. It sounds like it's compressing and just grabbing stuff together, but it doesn't sound unnatural. It doesn't sound really brick wall limiter slammy, and it just ties stuff together so well. So that end diode is super, super punchy. VMU is warm and creamy and gooey, and IPA25 is very, very attacky and kind of sits in the middle. There's a link in the description to this. Check it out, because I think it's one of the most versatile compressors I've ever used. You guys know from my channel that I love all the Pulsar stuff. I loved them even before I started doing any stuff for their channel. The Mu compressor, unbelievable. The massive EQ, unbelievable. 1178 compressor, fantastic. And that includes like this kind of way of thinking in the sidechain. I just find their stuff to be so versatile, so useful, so usable, and it just sounds great. So do yourself a favor, go and check out the demo. It's in the description, and I hope you enjoy it. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.